Also, I was reminded again as I came here to the library of that little sailboat out front, the Ventura, which Joe Kennedy talked about. And I have a fond memory, I guess it's a fond memory, of the Ventura myself. And it was when Ted and I one time were in summer school in 1953 at Harvard. And Ted said to me one day, you know, why don't you come with me this weekend? I'm going down to the Cape. It's a lot of fun. There's going to be a sailboat race. It's called the Nantucket Regatta. It's a lot of fun. And I want you to come down and be part of my crew on the sailboat race. And I said, Ted, I'm sure that's an honor to be invited to be on your crew in a sailboat race, but I've never been on a sailboat. I think I've seen a picture of a sailboat. I said, I come from Iowa, and the only boat I ever saw were barges on the Mississippi River. Well, he said, there's nothing to it. There's nothing to it. How many times have we all heard Ted say, there's nothing to it? At that time, we were both young. I didn't quite understand that comment, as I grew to understand later. I said, okay. So we got in the car, and Ted and I were driving down to the Cape, and he turned on the car radio, and we were enjoying the trip, listening to some music, and this was on Friday afternoon, and suddenly the radio broadcast was interrupted with a bulletin, and the bulletin said, serious storm warnings, and it said, danger at sea, don't anyone go out in the ocean. And I said, well, Ted, I guess the sailboat's off, trip's off. Oh, there's nothing to it. And I said, well, the fellow on the radio thought there was something. He said, there's nothing to it. So I said, he must know what he's doing. You know, he lives down there. And I've never been on the ocean. So when we got down to the house, when we got down to the Kennedy house, it was about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And there were dark, black storm clouds gathering. But I said, Ted, it looks kind of scary. He said, nothing to it. So I said, well, I'm hungry. He said, I'm hungry too. And so it was about 3 and we'd missed lunch. And we went in and we went right to the kitchen, where I often went with him. We were down there right to the kitchen. And the cook was still there, and he said, I'm just finishing up here, but I have some leftover salmon salads, mixed salmon salad. And I could make you boys some sandwiches, if you'd like. And I thought, well, we both thought that was a good idea. And so we didn't have a lot of time, he said, so I only had 2 salmon salad sandwiches. I had a quart of milk with it. I would have had more, but we didn't have time, really. So Ted says, come on, we got to get going now. And now it's about 4 o'clock. And so we get out, and in those days, they didn't have all the fancy docks and everything, even around the family compound. It was just kind of a beach, as I remember. And he said, we got to get in the boat. I said, okay. And I looked out in the horizon looking for this boat. And I said, where's the boat? He said, there's the boat. Well, if any of you have seen the Maya out front, that was the boat. The Maya is exactly excuse me, not the Maya, Victoria. The Victoria, you've seen that little boat out front. That's the boat I'm talking about. That's the boat he pointed out that said we were going on a sailboat race with. And it's 26 feet long. And Ted and I both weighed at the time over 200 pounds. We were both over 6 feet tall. And I said, yeah. And he said, that's it, that's the boat, let's get it out in the water. So I did what I could to help get out in the water, but the water at that time, there were huge waves now. There was thunder, there was lightning, the sky was black, and I could hardly get in the boat. It was bouncing so much, and he's at the, I guess, the tiller or something. And suddenly I realized this friend of mine that I thought I knew quite well started screaming at me, shouting at me. I was terrified. After a while, I was more terrified of him than the storm. And I didn't know this man. And so he kept screaming at me, the spinnaker, the jib, port side, secure that, whatever. And Ted's not always easy to understand when you know what he's talking about. And here with the incredible roar now of the ocean and the waves and this little tiny, it's like a cork on we're being bounced all over, and it's my fault. And so I'm just hanging on for dear life, and we only got about 200 miracle yards out, and I lost the sandwiches. And I thought I was going to die. And I've never been so miserable. I'm hanging over the side of the boat, and he's screaming at me. I mean, do you think he said, "Hey, I'm sorry. Do you feel bad?" Forget it. And so somehow I pulled myself together. Somehow we righted this boat in this incredible storm. Really unbelievable. It still scares me thinking about it. So we finally get all the way over to Nantucket. It's 11 o'clock at night. And I'm saying to Ted, well, which motel do we stay in? And Ted said, we're not staying in a motel. I said, we aren't. We're all wet. We're all cold. No. Where are we staying, Teddy? We're staying on the boat. So, I realized then I was with something out of Captain Ahab of Moby Dick. So, believe it or not, there were 4 cushions. And they were, of course, all wet and everything. But there were 4 cushions, and he took 2. I wanted to take 3, but he took 2. I took 2. There were 3 inches of water, cold seawater, seaweed, everything. We pulled the boat up on the beach, and that's where we spent the night. Well, this was a lot of fun so far. So the next day we got up, and we needed a 3rd man on our crew. Ted said. I didn't have any idea what we needed. I knew I needed a lot more than one more man. And so we go walking down in Nantucket, and sure enough, there's this poor little guy who was a salesman at the Andover shop in Cambridge. And Ted went up to him and said, would you like to go sailing with us today? And the poor kid said, yeah, I'd like to. He was shanghaied him. We took him. And just like I was, he pulled him on the boat and me on the boat, and off we go for the races. And so the races start, I guess, and from that point on, all I remember is Ted yelling about me to get up on the right side front of the boat or the left side, and he always claims that when I was to rotate with the other little guy, that I said, you heard him, get up there! And of course it was really my turn to go up. So anyway, somehow this race was mercifully over. I didn't see anything except this cold water pouring on me, sunburned, a t-shirt. It was a nightmare. And I didn't even see any of the other boats, but we kept going round and round and round and round. So finally, this thing was mercifully over. And Ted seemed satisfied. I had no idea. Probably I was satisfied. I lived through it. But I looked out, and it was like a mirage. Here's this great big yacht, and it was the Honey Fitz. And Ted sort of wanted to surprise me. He knew, you know, we all know how much fun Ted has making his friends uncomfortable at times. And he hadn't told me, but Ambassador Kennedy had come out to watch the race and had brought 3 or 4 of his friends along, and they were out there in the big Honey Fitz, named after Ted's grandfather. And it looked like I never saw anything that looked so good to me. But that boat, and he said, now we're going to get aboard the boat, and we're going to, you know, they're going to tow. They're going to tow the Victoria back behind the boat. I thought, my God, this is okay. So we come alongside the Honey Fitz. And I remember I'm like Eddie Rickenbacker in South Pacific, been on the boat, you know, starving to death out there in the water, cold, miserable. And I remember Ambassador Kennedy had a megaphone. And he leaned over the side of the boat and he said, good race, Teddy, but I got some bad news for you. Yeah, the captain says the sea is far too rough to tow you boys back on that boat. So you'll have to sail back. I mean, I couldn't believe my ears. I wanted to jump out of the boat, take my chances they might pick me up. So anyway, but he said, I have something for you here in this container, a hot clam chowder, hot, vacuum pack, and these clamp things on it, and he's lowering it on over a rope, and Teddy always claimed that I grabbed it and tore the rope off, ripped off the top without opening it, just tore the top, and then proceeded to chug-a-lug the whole canteen about this much, and the only thing I missed was what went down my T-shirt. And I said, boy, that was good. And he said, well, Teddy said, what about me? I'm supposed to have some of that. Well, I don't think it was entirely true that I drank all of it, but I drank most of it. So anyway, they pull the rope up and we're on our own again. I've been 24 hours on this boat. And so now we head back home, I guess. Well, fortunately, the trip back wasn't all that bad after what I'd been through, and it was fairly calm. But we now get within sight of Hyannis. After how many hours? I don't know. But you could see the lights of the house, and probably a half mile away. And I'm thinking, boy, we'll be at a hot shower in no time. And suddenly, the ship stopped. The boat just stopped. And no wind. And I said, no wind. We weren't moving. I could see the house. But I didn't know how we were going to get there. It was too far to swim. And I said, well, Teddy, what do you do now? He said, we get out of the boat. I said, we get out of the boat? Yeah, and he said, one of us has got to push and the other pull. The other pull the rope ahead of the boat. I mean, you can't believe it, can you? I couldn't believe it. So after 24 hours on this boat, now it's 11 midnight, something, we climb out of that boat into the water again. And he's pulling and I'm pushing. And after a while, we finally make it to shore. Well, when we were back at summer school, it was a whole week before I could get the seaweed taste out of my mouth. But you know, in the following years, I was fortunate to take many sailboat trips with Ted. Not only around Hyannis and the islands, but also to Maine, also to the Caribbean, also to the Greek islands. And those were some of the most memorable, really truly enjoyable and pleasurable memories that I could ever enjoy. Always full of fun, always full of joy, and full of laughter. And Ted was awfully good about it. I never learned how to sail, but Teddy always gave me a pass on those voyages. And for that, I'm always grateful. And for those memories, smooth sailing, Teddy. Thank you.